This podcast is a proud member of Pod Nation Media Network.
Flicker of reels, the shadows crawl. Curtains rise, a ghostly sprawl. The frames are whispers, the stories call. The drifters hum in a hollow tune. Moonlight cuts through velvet gloom. Is it a dream or a real too soon? Step into the screen where the dark turns keen. Journey with the Cinephile, unseen, unseen. The veils twist and turn as the silent light burns. A world unknown where the shadows yearn.
Hello and welcome, listeners, to Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast, where we take a deep dive into the world of horror cinema, from the eerie classics to the latest spine-chilling releases. Join me as I explore the history, themes, and artistry of horror one film at a time. Whether you're a seasoned horror fan or just stepping into the shadows, this journey is for you. So dim the lights, embrace the fear, and let's talk horror. And let's do that on episode 336. I am your tour guide of David Garrett Jr., recording out of Columbus, Ohio. So for this episode here is going to be my last Centennial Club that I'm going to be doing here for this year, as this is going to be Centennial Club number 27. So the two feature reviews I'm going to have here, the first one is going to be kind of a horror-adjacent film. I'll kind of get into it a little bit as I break it down in its actual review, but the first one's going to be The Plague. This one actually came out in 2025, had a limited release there, and got a wide release here in 2026. And I'll pair this up with Midnight Faces. So this is one that is from 1926, of course, so this kind of makes for an interesting little double feature here, as we have of two different types of invisible enemies, one a metaphorical dread and the other one a mass killer hiding in an old dark house. So that's going to be the kind of through thing there for those two featured reviews. And then for mini reviews here, my 1986, that is going to be a Scouring Through the Sixes rewatch, is going to be From Beyond. Haven't seen this one since college. I got to check out Angel Dust as well as Demons of the Mind, and then I gave a rewatch here to a wide release 2026 film of We Buried the Dead. And then I'm going to have a couple of documentaries because life kind of got in the way here for me to watch some more stuff. And the first one's going to be Category 3, The Untold Story of Hong Kong Exploitation Cinema, and the other one is going to be Machete, Maidens, Unleashed. So that's all I have here then for this intro. I don't think there's anything else I need to go into, so let me go ahead and say thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy coming on this journey with me.
You know what that sound means? It's another episode of Game for a Movie, where we ask, are you game for a movie?
Tell me, Andre.
There's no special features on that goddamn DVD, alright?
Oh, wow.
For Hansel and Gretel?
Hansel and
You
Gretel.
have a
watch-
DVD
you watch it?
of
Yeah.
Hansel and Gretel.
She basically has sex with it, somehow.
No,
Foreplay.
yeah, yes.
She's chair foreplay.
I mean, they knocked it out of the park, which is why it's my number 3. So.
Oh!
I mean, I wouldn't be in it because this movie doesn't have women. But, you know, that's
You-
fine.
It
It has one. Right.
It has one.
You would have 3 lines of dialogue.
So
But how
here's
much-
three.
Oh.
Okay. So I'm actually gonna get, I earn my 4 sentences of dialogue rather than, here, have a paycheck. You just stood there on the screen. You're a sexy lamp.
Super porn. Anyway, we're not
Dark
getting...
Phoenix 2.
No.
No.
Because they really hate each other, so we get to enjoy some wonderful comedic scenes of them hating each other so much that they get into physical altercations that include her biting ex-detective Phillips's dick.
Okay.
But we don't in a hot tub.
I know all of those words were English, but the way you constructed them, I'm lost.
I'm not following the arrangement of them very well. For those who haven't rated us or liked or given us a review, don't say that we haven't given you anything of value after listening to this podcast. You now know the difference between an R-rated dick and an NC-17 X-rated dick. You're welcome.
Thank you guys for listening to Game for a Movie, where we ask, are you game for a movie? We'll see you next time. Bye!
Bye.
Are you tired of coffee?
And for my first mini review here is going to be From Beyond from 1986. This is directed by Stuart Gordon. It was written by Dennis Paoli. And we also have the adaptations was going to be done by Brian Usna, Paoli, and Stuart Gordon. And then this is from the short story by H.P. Lovecraft. So this is starring Jeffrey Combs, Barbara Crampton, and Ken Foree. This is a body horror sci-fi film that is from the United States and a co-production with Italy. Currently sitting on a 6.6 on IMDb and a 3.5 on Letterboxd for Synopsis. A group of scientists have developed the Resonator, a machine which allows whoever is within range to see beyond normal perceptibility reality, but when the experiment succeeds, they are immediately attacked by a terrible life forms. So I know I originally saw this back in college. All I knew that this was in the horror genre. Now, I'm a bit older and more versed in horror. There are many things here that I missed, that first time around. So this is an Empire Picture film before Charles Band turned it into Full Moon. He executive produced this. There's also Usna, and it was inspired by an H.P. Lovecraft story. There's an all-star team here on the effects as well. And then Stuart Gordon, as director, he's phenomenal with doing some of these things, especially with lower budget. So this is my Scouring Through the Sixes rewatch. And so I'm going to go ahead and start is by saying that I've read the short story in the past. From what I know, it takes the first few pages and then uses the prologue before expanding out into a story that we get here. Both have the machine that allows them to see the different planes of existence. In the story, it is Crawford, who is portrayed by Combs, who is the mad scientist. It also leans more into the cosmic dread, where this goes into the body and splatter horror. Regardless, it works in its own kind of different ways. So now that it's set up, and let's kind of look more into capturing the cosmic horror that Lovecraft wrote about. The Resonator seems to create the barriers, or it seems to take down the barriers between these different planes. It is a scary idea that there's a world like ours inhabited by these monsters. The pineal gland is important in seeing them as well. I love the medical theory that Catherine, who is portrayed by Barbara Crampton, comes up with, that schizophrenia could be explained by having this gland being enlarged. It boils down to pseudoscience, but in the world of the movie, I can work with it. But I also like here is the contained horror aspects. For the most part, we're working with a cast of 5 characters. It's just the 3, though, with Crawford, Catherine, and Bubba, who is portrayed by Foree. And then we have this haunting figure of Dr. Pretorius every time they turn the machine on, and he is portrayed by Ted Sorrell. And he's evolving into this creature. I love how the machine reconnects itself as Edward gains power. And then I should also say the other character here I would bring up would be Dr. Block, portrayed by Carolyn Purdy Gordon. So also, the monsters that are introduced, I know Dr. Pretorius and something in the basement are practical. That was something I love to see. How it builds tension and atmosphere is great. So other themes here include the hubris of Dr. Pretorius. He's a mad scientist who is seduced by what he's changed it into. I like how it's set up where he's a sadist who's into BDSM. So we know that he likes to hurt people. There's then this pineal gland that grows due to the power of the machine. That plays with the ideas of addiction as it transforms people who use it. There's a fragility of sanity, which we see with Crawford and Catherine. I'll go next on the filmmaking aspects. The cinematography and framing are good. It does feel like a set at times, but that's not necessarily an issue. I do love the contained feel of being trapped in a house with monsters. The practical effects are great. Having the team here of John Carl Beekler, Robert Kurtzman, and Greg Nicotero was great. Even the eel creatures that are kind of floating around, and I'm assuming is kind of doing a little bit of overlay stuff there, those look good. It's gross out at times with the body horror, which is great. As also the soundtrack fits for what was needed with building the atmosphere. Also up then it would be the acting performances. Combs is great as a scientist who has made a discovery that is terrifying him. He is forced to, keep confronting it by other people. And then Crampton is also great. Seeing her in the BDSM outfit is legendary, and she's also topless at one point. That's also a perk. I love Foree as the muscle. Sorrell is such a great villain. Purdy Gordon and the rest of the cast around the software was needed as well. So in conclusion, this is a fantastic slice of 80s cosmic body horror that manages to balance its B-movie sensibilities with genuine moments of dread and atmosphere. The practical effects remain the highlight, delivering gruesome, memorable transformation and creatures, bolstered by strong performances from Combs and Crampton. The focused direction of Gordon, the film successfully translate the Lovecraftian core, the danger of seeing too much, into a visceral, entertaining, and ultimately gross experience. It's a must-see for fans of the era and the horror subgenres. It blends so effectively. So my rating here then for From Beyond, I give this one an 8 out of 10. And then for my second mini review here is going to be Angel Dust, or the original title of Enjiro Datsudo. This is from 1994. It was directed by Garuko Ryu Ishii, who also co-wrote this with Yorozu Ikuda. This is starring Kaho Minami, Takishi Makamatsu, and Isushi Toyokawa. This is a Japanese drama, horror, romance, thriller film that, of course, since it is Japanese, is from Japan. It is currently sitting on a 6.8 on IMDb and a 3.9 on Letterboxd, with our synopsis being: every Monday, a young woman is murdered in the subway. Leading psychiatrist Setsuko Suma to investigate the crimes, looking for a pattern. This leads her to confront demons from her past. And that psychologist or psychiatrist, whatever, is going to be portrayed by Mina Mai. So this is a film that I learned about thanks to Letterboxd and their top 250 horror movies list. The extent of what I knew is that it's from Japan, so it intrigued me to check this one out. Other than that, I did come to this one blind, just knowing the information that I've shared here. And this does actually double as a Foray Through the Floors watch, so I added that to that list over there. So where I'm going to start then is that I had to look up a synopsis to make sure I didn't miss anything. The story is quite simple. We have a series of murders occurring on a busy, important subway line with little evidence. The police call in a top psychiatric person is Setsuko to find clues. Her brilliance and the emotional toll it takes kind of gave me strong vibes of like Will Graham from the Hannibal books and movies. So now that set up, I did want to look a little bit more at our lead character of Setsuko. This character is it's a character study, effectively portrays her initial confidence as she starts the case, contrasting with her subsequent breakdown. As she immerses herself in the evidence, she begins smoking and drinking heavily, using sunglasses to mask her exhaustion. Her eventual connections are logical. Minami brings the character to life. The narrative concept of her remaining humanity is compelling. Now, something else I found interesting here is that this is fairly linear. Setsuko makes the connection that a victim was a patient in this deprogramming clinic. This brings Setsuko's dread because Rai, who is portrayed by, it's Rai Aku, portrayed by Wakamatsu, morally is bankrupt. And there is a history there where she actually worked with him at one point. So this, and they might have even been lovers if I'm remembering correctly. So this doesn't hide the fact that he's a bad person, that he could be involved. It then becomes almost like a Hannibal Will Graham dynamic where he messes with her mentally. Wakamatsu is so stoic and calculated. He just feels evil when you know what he's doing to his patients, and that adds fear and tension. So the film explores themes of like lost identity, questioning if Rai's deprogramming therapy, which helps people to leave cults, is closer to brainwashing, a parallel to religions and cults. And I mean, you could almost look at it, maybe not necessarily using the same type of drugs or anything, but like MK Ultra type stuff. Memory and trauma act as a haunting force. Setsuko's obsession makes her a mirror to the killer. The anonymity that comes with the big city where murders occur without witnesses despite crowded trains highlights the limited evidence. They also travel on a loop, which is another element of Setsuko's journey for the truth. That should be enough for the story. Let's shift over to the acting performances. I've already said that Minami and Wakamatsu are great. They're both so calculating in what they do, and they're similar. It works so well with the evidence as it gets revealed. I would also say that Toyokawa is also interesting. Now, the normal gender roles here are switched because he plays Tumo, who is Setsuko's husband. So their gender roles are switched, where Setsuko is the career-driven woman. Tumo is more in his feelings, trying to be there for her. She's cold towards him as he gets engulfed into this case and everything like that. So not necessarily the dynamic that you normally get to see play out, which I did rather enjoy, seeing how that all worked out as she gets engulfed into the case. We also have Ryoko Takazawa. He's good in his role. I'd also say the rest of the cast around software was needed. All it's left then to be the filmmaking aspects. This has a gritty feel to the cinematography and framing. It's also, I'm guessing, part of this is budgetary when it was made. It adds a layer of dark subject matter as well. There's a limited effects here, but what they do is more with like camera elements, so that's good. As somebody who's colorblind, there's an interesting reveal here using that. Other than that, the sound design and music fit for what was needed, building the tone to tell this dark tale. If I have a gripe, this runs a little bit too long and my interest wanes late in the runtime. So in conclusion, this is a compelling psychological horror film that expertly uses its detective structure to explore profound themes of identity, trauma, and moral ambiguity. While the film's runtime may test the patience of some viewers, the powerful performances from Minami and Wakamatsu, coupled with Ishii's effective, gritty direction and striking cinematography, make this a worthwhile, deeply unsettling experience. Its exploration of brainwashing and the ethical complexity of deprogramming leaves a lasting impression, so to find its place as a standout entry in Japanese horror cinema, and a valuable find for anybody delving into this Letterboxd list. So my rating then for Angel Dust, I give this one a 7.5 out of 10 and would recommend it. Then up next here, I have another first-time watch of Demons of the Mind from 1972, directed by Peter Sykes. So this is written between Christopher Wicking and Frank Goodwin. This is starring Robert Hardy, Shane Brandt, and Gillian Hills. This is a full horror thriller film that is from the United Kingdom. It is currently sitting on a 5.3 on IMDb and a 2.8 on Letterboxd, with our synopsis being: a physician discovers that his two children are being kept virtually imprisoned in their house by their father. He investigates and discovers a web of sex, incest, and satanic possession. So this is one I didn't know much about. When I learned about it would have been the Horror Show Guide Encyclopedia that I'm working through. This is the next film up for the letter D. What I didn't realize was that until settling in to watch this, that this is a later Hammer film. I also recognize the names of like Hardy and then Patrick McGee. Other than that, I came to this one blind, not even remembering the blurb that I had read about it from that encyclopedia. But where I'm going to go ahead and start is discussing the title of the film. It actually gets uttered by Dr. Falkenberg here, who is portrayed by McGee, when he's talking to Carl Richter, portrayed by Paul Jones. And the doctor's on the verge of a breakthrough about mental illness. What is interesting is that Christianity is shunned in this area where this film takes place. The townspeople have pagan beliefs, which bothers the man who runs the inn, Fischinger, portrayed by Robert Brown, as well as a woman that both him and this character of Klaus, portrayed by Kenneth J. Warren, know. And her name is Inge, portrayed by Virginia Weatherall. This kind of piqued my interest in what they're doing there. And I should also say Klaus is kind of like the caretaker for the manor that belongs to Baron Zorn. His first name is Frederick, portrayed by Hardy. So this also invokes like Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher, exploring how royal families attempt to maintain pure bloodlines through incest led to genetic defects and mutations. Frederick and then his sister-in-law, Aunt Hilda, portrayed by Yvonne Mitchell, they believe that the history has caused the Zorn clan's madness, leading to them to seek Dr. Falkenberg's help to cure the children. I enjoyed this angle of both Zorn children appearing mentally unstable from the outset. So what also kind of happens here is that the daughter is Elizabeth, portrayed by Hills, and she ends up fleeing from an asylum that is ran by Dr. Falkenberg, and she ends up shacking up with Carl when she runs into him, and he lives in a cabin like outside of the city and everything. She seems to be fairly happy, but then Aunt Hilda shows up, I believe with Klaus, and they bring her home. So another element here would be modern science versus pagan beliefs. Now I do have to say that when I say modern, this is rudimentary in our concepts. I do like Dr. Falkenberg exploring the idea of mental illness as well as there being a curse. The latter correlates with the village that does this ritual. What I like is that Dr. Falkenberg and Carl are watching on. They ask Fissinger and Inge. Neither fully know about what it is or what they're trying to even do, but they're ideas that have been passed down, and it makes more sense to the villagers. So an interesting element here would be that it sounds like religion is driven out of this area. The priest is looked at as an outsider who is insane. When we see him, he's definitely like an Old Testament in his faith. He's also violent and defeating evil, which isn't necessarily the normal for people that are supposed to be of faith. And to flesh out the other themes here, there's one that I didn't even bring up, but it goes along with the mental state of the children, is that Frederick isolated them, which also seems to be a contribution to how they are now. He did this as a projection of his own guilt. Now, I did bring up that Dr. Falkenberg is trying to do, and he is also trying to be stopped. There's distrust in his method. We also see that the outsiders coming to this place, that it's stuck in its ways. The last one would be a breakdown of the patriarchy as his children fight back to flee. So that should be enough for the story. Let's go over to the acting performances. I do like Hardy, Briant, and Hillis as this trio. What I like is that when we first meet Elizabeth, she seems almost mute. We then see her brothers locked in a room. Frederick seems like he's a loving father who wants to help. There are other things that get revealed. Mitchell works along with Warren as he tries to help his family. McGee is an actor who I've seen a good handful of films, and he's never done a bad performance that I've seen so far. I'd also say that Jones, there is another character here that I haven't even brought up yet, of Michael Hordern. He is the priest. Thought he was solid. Brown, Weatherall, and the rest of the cast running software was needed. Also thought to be filmmaking aspects. I do think the cinematography and the framing are good. There is like a period piece feel here, or it is a period piece, so capturing that worked. Hammer knew what they were doing there, so I'm not shocked. The costumes felt of the era when it was set. We were limited in the effects used, but it also doesn't necessarily need them. This is a cerebral story exploring broken psyches and torment. Other than that, the music and sound design fit for what was. So in conclusion, this is a strong cerebral addition to the later Hammer canon, which successfully explores themes of generational madness, incest, and breakdown of the patriarchy. The film's strength lies in its psychological depth and the successful presentation of conflicting ideas, which, as Dr. Falkenberg's rudimentary science against the village pagan beliefs, bolstered by solid performances, particularly from our central trio here of Hardy, Briant, and Hills. McGee in the film is visually effective and as a period piece with good cinematography and framing, making it a thoughtful, compelling horror experience. So my rating here for this film then, here, Demons of the Mind, I give a 7 out of 10 too. And my last review here is I'm going to do for a feature before I do some of these documentaries is going to be We Bury the Dead. This is technically from 2024, getting into my release here in 2026. This is written and directed by Zach Hildrich. This is starring Daisy Ridley, Bretton Thwaites, and Mark Cole-Smith. This is a monster, zombie, horror thriller film that is a co-production of Australia and the United States. This is currently sitting on a 5.6 on IMDb and a 2.8 on Letterboxd. So I'm going to go ahead and give you the premise here in just a second. Let me over to what I have. Is following catastrophic U.S. military accident in Tasmania, volunteers are sent on an island for cleanup. It's a somber biological apocalypse where the dead just don't stay down. they rise with an unsettling, docile stillness that slowly curdles into aggression. So this is a shift for Daisy Ridley. And I'll say I rather enjoy this more than most people. So the shift that I was saying for Daisy is that she delivers a grounded, emotional performance as Ava, a woman searching for her husband who is missing as he was in Tasmania when this all went down. She thinks he might still be okay, or he might have came back because where he's located on the island where his resort was, that he should be okay. So this isn't Ridley that we know from like the blockbusters. It's a heavy, nuanced portrayal of a woman seeking closure in a relationship that is already fractured before the world ended. We don't necessarily know that at first, so this is something that kind of develops as things go on, which I thought was rather good. So we also have like existential zombies here. This leans in the idea that those who returned are people who still have a purpose. This leads to a narrative that is more interesting in the weight of regret and the burden of grief that traditional jump scares would kind of bring. And my problem with this film is that we don't lean into this enough, and I think that if we did, it could have been much higher in my rating. But the cinematography captures a drab, fire-choke landscape that feels appropriately bleak. A standout details of sound design, especially the sound of these dead grinding their teeth, which adds a layer of like skin-crawling dread to that experience there. So while this is a human-focused zombie story, it isn't a new concept. A lot of the ones that are actually better in this kind of focus more on the human characters, so I mean there's that. This succeeds though as a practical effects with its quiet, devastating arc. It's a taut, atmospheric 7.5 for me that finds its horror in the unknown and the fragility of the human heart. So like I said, some people I've heard actually don't really care for this one. I thought it was fine. I actually did not dislike either of my two watches. It kind of came down a little bit for me where I was previously. So I would still recommend it though if you're a zombie fan. And I have a review here for the documentary Category 3, The Untold Story of Hong Kong Exploitation Cinema. So this is directed by Callum Waddle. This features Daniel Yi Hang Chan, Godfrey Ho, and Josie Ho. So, like I said, documentary here. This is from, I believe, the United Kingdom. Let me double check to make sure that I'm not... Yes. And then this is currently sitting on a 6.6 on IMDb. And a 3.2 on Letterboxd, with the synopsis being the rise and fall of Hong Kong's notorious Category 3 cinema, which reached a peak during the years 1988 and the lead up to the handover in 1997. So this is one that I learned about through podcasts. I believe I have to give credit here to the 22 Shots of Moods and Horror. I'm guessing that they brought this up, and I know for a fact that they've done some shows on Category 3 films from Hong Kong. And I know Mr. Parker is another one who definitely needs credit here as somebody who kind of helped introduce me to all this stuff. So I was interested about learning a little bit more and what went into making these and their lasting impact. Where I'm going to start is learning about the history of this film classification. It seems like there was more of like a catch-all and allowed filmmakers to go over the top with the violence and nudity, as well as anything else that they could think of. So China had a rich history with their martial arts films, and those were also popular, of course, then in Hong Kong. The films that would took inspiration, though, from like the Shaw Brothers. Now, something interesting is that the most popular early films wasn't even necessarily made by a team or used money from Hong Kong. This is one that's actually on my list. I haven't seen it as of yet, but it's Men Behind the Sun. This did well because of the showing the harsh treatment that Japanese soldiers did to Chinese and Russian soldiers. This falls into like prison films and Mad Scientists, as well as it shows torture. There was a sequel as well, but so like these ones are on my list, like I was saying. I just haven't gotten to them yet. But I did appreciate hearing from some people like Anthony Wong Chao Sang, a cult icon who felt The Untold Story, that film, where he gave a solid performance despite the film's wild nature. He thought it ruined his career. It was sad because I rather liked him in that. However, Josie Ho, a younger actor and icon in her own right, as she did a later Cat 3 film of Dream Home, she pointed out his iconic status during this interview in this one as she had related to him. So I was just kind of glad that was featured in the doc. This also includes like Simon Yam, another Hong Kong cinema legend. So hearing from experts like Sean Tierney, Mike Hostenek, James Mudge, and even our director here of Waddle, they all have such interesting knowledge. Since I'm not overly versed in these films, being referenced or knowing the background information, what they're able to share is very helpful. It definitely helps to frame things. Also hearing from like Chow Song Ho, Godfrey Ho, Bei Logan, and Kim Kwok Luang, who have all worked in the industry. It also feels kind of like the video nasties from the United Kingdom. They didn't hit necessarily as much censorship, but they were restricted to who could see them, and this helped to create notoriety. I also said this documentary was well made, how they construct it with the introduction as it hooks the viewer, then explaining the history and moving the timeline, focusing on Chow Sang and Yam for a couple of these sections is good. Cinematography and framing were also right up there. You can see this is professionally done. Editing in footage to visually show what they're talking about, something that definitely helps. And it livens this up, so we're seeing more than just the interviewees. Ultimately, this serves as an insightful and well-produced retrospective on a controversial yet pivotal era of Hong Kong cinema. By combining expert commentary with candid reflections from the actors and directors who define the genre, from icons like Anthony Wong and Simon Yam to the younger generation presented by Josie Ho, the documentary successfully charts the history, impact, and cultural context of the Category 3 classification. It is an essential watch for anybody interested in international cult cinema, proving that these often maligned films possess a significant lasting legacy that goes beyond mere shock value. So I gave this documentary here an 8 out of 10. Would recommend it, especially if it might not be as interesting if you know quite a bit or have seen most of these films, but if you're more like a novice like me, I think this has some interesting insight. And I have the documentary here that I checked out of Machete, Maidens Unleashed. This is from 2010. It was directed by Mark Hartley, who co-wrote this with Andrew Levold. This features Roger Corman, John Landis, and Pete Toombs. This is a documentary history film that's from Australia. It is currently sitting on a 7.3 on IMDb and a 3.5 on Letterboxd, where their synopsis being a fast-moving odyssey into the subterranean world of the rarely explored province of Filipino genre filmmaking. So this is one that I learned about on podcasts. I actually believe that it was on the ABCs of Hidden Horror. I think they had this and they were running through their movie collection, and that's when I first learned about it. So what I heard intrigued me, as films from the Philippines are ones that I'm limited on the ones that I've seen so far. I believe to date I've only ever really seen like The Beast of Yellow Night and Horror of the Blood Monsters. Now that second one is actually a US film that is spliced in with something called like Tangani, which was a Filipino movie from the 1950s. I don't believe there are any others offhand, so I was just kind of intrigued to learn more. So let's set the stage that the Philippines had a rich film industry before people started going over there from like Hollywood, but it was movies that were shown in their country. Roger Corman and other low-budget filmmakers found success by creating exploitation films for the grindhouse and drive-in markets. They leaned hard into the 3 Bs: blood, boobs, and beasts. What helped was that there's an exotic location that allowed filmmakers to stretch money farther. It didn't hurt that there was not much in the way of conditions, both sanitary and safety. It made it feel like, or it's these like things that helped to make these low budget gems. What also helped here was hearing from filmmakers and experts. Of course, we had like Corman, who took full advantage. We also have like John Landis, Joe Dante, Jack Hill, Marlene Clark. We also had Eddie Romero, Alan Arcus, Sam Shepard, and Brian Trenchard Smith. Whether they were actually there or just know about what was going on, it helps give a better understanding of the material that is being presented. Now, something else I want to give credit here is that we have an array of films that were made. You would have horror that seemed to kind of really start off and kick things going, and then you would go on to make like women in prison films, dabbled a little bit into fantasy. There were martial arts, and then war movies. Something that was brought up for this last one was that's where they kind of started. It didn't do so well, so it pretty much all but failed. But it wasn't until like Francis Ford Coppola made his epic Apocalypse Now that it truly showcased what you could do there. Wildly enough, Ferdinand Marcos, who was the president of the country at this time, or at least for a good majority of it, allowed them to use military equipment. They also touch on like the socio-political landscape of the country. There were Islamic rebels who would rise up. This would lead to kidnapping and needing to flee areas due to fighting. There are other tragedies that happen going back to like the safety concerns. This is kind of like a lightning in the bottle era where people that had resources, they could take advantage. I'll then just end this out by saying that this is well made. Editing footage from the films they're referring to and showing what they're talking about is a good touch. Also, just having footage of the area and giving a true look at what they were talking about was great. Outside of that, this is professionally made and it flew by while watching. That's something I want to give credit to. So all in all, this is a fascinating and well-constructed documentary that serves as an excellent entry point into the wild world of Filipino exploitation cinema. It not only chronicles the films themselves, from low-budget horror to women in prison flicks, but also definitely contextualizes them within the unique socio-political and economic landscape that made their production possible. For anyone intrigued by this intersection of B-movies, drive-in culture, and exotic, rapid-fire filmmaking, this documentary offers a compelling, informative, and highly entertaining look behind the scenes. And like I said, I rather enjoyed this one and gave it an 8 out of 10. I would recommend this for sure. And that's all I have here then for mini reviews. Let me go ahead then and get you over the trailer of my first featured review.
First day in camp. Pretty good.
No, yeah, good.
You know, this whole thing could be a little daunting. Pick it up!
So what's with Eli?
Eli's got the plague. It's not funny, bro.
It's like contagious?
Incredibly, but only through touch, so if you're exposed, oh man, you just gotta wash yourself like stat. Turns your brain to baby food. No brain, no nothing.
The plague is fake. So can you please tell everyone that I'm good?
Okay.
I think there's something wrong with me.
What do you mean?
I just feel something's wrong.
Someone giving you a hard time, Ben.
Why are you doing this to me?
And for my first featured review here is going to be The Plague from 2025. Getting its wide release here in 2026. It did a limited theatrical run and then some festival stuff. So yeah, that's kind of why it's going to be included here. And this one, I'll kind of get into why I'm also including it because it's not necessarily a horror film, but I'll come back to that. So this is written and directed by Charlie Polinger. This is starring Everett Blunk, K.O. Martin, and Joel Edgerton, while also featuring here the likes of Kenny Rasmussen, Lucas Adler, Caden Burris, Elliot Heffernan, Lennox Espy, Colton Lee, Nicholas Rosovan, George Ion, Gio Dobry, Irina Strohashku, Ekaterina Mitrio, Edward Shemak, Philip Wang, Alex Dumasco, and William Nicholas Sango. And if I mispronounce any of those names, I do apologize. So this is technically a psychological drama thriller film, but there's also a little bit of body horror, and I would say psychological horror involved in there as well. This is a co-production between the United States, Romania, Australia, and United Arab Emirates. This is currently sitting on a 6.4 on IMDb and a 3.6 on Letterboxd, with a synopsis being: a socially awkward tween endures the ruthless hierarchy at a water polo camp, his anxiety spiraling into psychological turmoil over the summer. So this is one that intrigued me when I saw the title. It did its festival rounds, like I was saying, in 2025. I know that it came to the Gateway Film Center for a limited theatrical run late in December. So this is technically considered a wide release for 2026, so I was on the fence because I wasn't sure if this was even going to be horror. Everything I was seeing pointed not to be, but then I heard some people talking about it, and they were classifying it both, like, on both sides of the fence here. Since there wasn't a new release at the theater, I decided to go ahead and pull the trigger and make this a featured review here. I decided to pull the trigger and make it a featured review here. And let's do some featured notes first. I'm going to start with our director here of Polinger. He's helmed 2 works. This isn't considered to be horror, but his follow-up is a reimagining of The Mask of the Red Death, which is an Edgar Allan Poe story. It doesn't have a release date as of yet. So we have 4 assistant directors. First is going to be Diana Molea. This is their only credit. Then we have Christian Curia. They've done this for 14 features in 1 short. He actually looked like he worked for Full Moon for a good stretch there. I've seen 3 of the works there. I've seen this, Watcher, and Retro Puppet Master. Now that middle one is not a Full Moon production. That last one is, though. So technically a 7 in genre. I've seen 28% of them. Top 3 that I'm missing right now are Vampire Journals, Witch House, and Serpent's Lair. The next is going to be Simona Denu. They've worked on 8 movies. I've seen 3. 5 are in horror with the new Strangers trilogy. I've seen the first 2 of that one so far. They've also done Pretty Lethal and Where from 2013 that I have not seen. And last is going to be Willie McGee. He was brought up when I saw the TV Globe. I've seen 3 of his 8 motion pictures for 37%. Also has 1 short. It looks like he has worked with Jill Schoenbrunn before. He also worked on We're All Going to the World's Fair. I believe that's a male. I'm not fully positive, but Willie could go either way, I guess. Then we also have Polinger, who wrote this. They have 3 works. Only one of them has been released, looks like, so far. Also did 4 shorts. He is also writing Mask of the Red Death. Moving to our cast. First is going to be Blook. They have 5 things. First of them that I've seen, he was also in Rush, that film that had all that backlash. Nothing truly in genre, though, as of yet. This is Martin's feature film debut. He has done a short, though. Then last is going to be Egerton. He's worked on 60 motion pictures and 17 shorts. I've seen 14. Not horror would be like Star Wars Episodes 2 and 3. He was also in Gatsby and The Green Knight. In horror, he's done 4. I've seen It Comes at Night and The Thing from 2011. I have not seen Whisper or Acolytes. All right, then let's jump into this movie here, and we're going to start going back into... This takes place in 2003. What is interesting is that I would have been slightly older than these like teens here, as I graduated in the spring of 2005. They're at a water polo camp. Our main character is Ben, portrayed by Bluick. He is doing what he can to fit in. Now, the leader of the popular kids is Jake, portrayed by Martin, and he's a bully. He is also has standing here since his father accidentally paid for 2 sessions, so this is the second time around. The camp is run by Daddy Wags, portrayed by Edgerton. So there's another teen here that was also from the first session is Eli, portrayed by Rasmussen. He is awkward and hangs out by himself. He is bullied due to having developed a rash. It manifests along with like pimples, and these are all over his back and sides. So Jake and his group call it the plague. They also claim that it affects your motor functions, making whoever is afflicted like uncoordinated. If Eli touches you, then you need to wash the infected area immediately or risk contraction. So Ben is torn. He befriends Jake enough, but even when you're in the group, you're still open to being mocked and doing stupid things. Now, Eli gets aroused and is made fun of in front of the girls. Ben feels bad for laughing, but the group gets punished by Daddy Wags. Ben decides to do the right thing and befriends Eli. The problem is that he gets infected by the plague and is ostracized. He stands up to Jake, but gets ridiculed like Eli, and he is faced with a difficult decision. What we choose has repercussions, and it will affect our lives forever to an extent. So let's only my recap and action of the characters. So this isn't the most complex story, nor does it need to be. As mentioned, it focuses on repercussions of decisions. The narrative centers on young teens dealing with bullying and the severe psychological effects that can come from that. The desire for popularity comes at a cost. Looking back, most high school drama is insignificant, but it feels crucial to those that have limited life experience. Ultimately, the choice made here will have lasting consequences on your interpretation. Now, since this is a character study, where I want to start would be our lead character of Ben. He doesn't know what to do here, and it sounds like he's recently moved. He is awkward and probably dealing with anxiety, so that's part of it. What is interesting is that making friends does come more naturally to some people. Bluick does well in showing the panic when he says something funny and the popular kids harp on it. It is an interesting look that is, fitting in, and these kids, it can be difficult even when you are accepted. There's an interesting dynamic. When the crew gets scolded by Daddy Wags, Ben befriends Eli. He secretly hangs out with him for fear that he's going to get made fun of, and this becomes a difficult line to toe. There is a moment where Ben offers to rub cream on the back of Eli. This turns into Jake mocking him when he finds out and saying that he gave him a back rub. There's this element here of making Ben sound like he's a homosexual. So we know that he has a crush on one of the girls in the synchronized swimming camp that shares the pool. There is this fear, though, of the accusations that, it's still around today. Other dynamics and character stuff here include first that would be with Jake. There's an interesting element here where we see him interact with his father. This indicates that his father is hard on him, which explains why Jake acts the way that he does. Martin shows good charisma for a bully. Another one would be Daddy Wags. He seems like a good guy, but I do like how he takes Ben aside and helps to comfort him. This gets relayed through a lot of different sense here of echoing things that I said about how most of this doesn't matter in the grand scheme. Edgerton is great as well. I then want to discuss the plague itself. While watching this, I did look up to see what this rash was. From what I read, there isn't an actual rash, or it might not even be real. It does seem like it's something that's more metaphorical. I know the effects on motor function probably is just awkward teens who are either uncoordinated or just not used to their body. The rash that Ben develops could be just hormones and a scarlet letter. That was quite intriguing. I then want to sum this up here on the themes and to say that this could be seen as like a Lord of the Flies dynamic. Even though they aren't stranded on an island, camp kind of carries a similar isolated feel. There is a social hierarchy that is developed from toxic masculinity. Peer pressure is pulling Ben and the other boys in. He struggles with the moral compass that he sees with the decisions hurting Eli. There is still this fear of isolation like you would have with the plague. These concepts are more of performative identity. So the last thing would be here with this is horror. In the grand scheme, no. There is drama. I can say this is a psychological thriller. The deeper we get into this, though, Ben is ostracized when they think that he has the plague. It turns into psychological horror. He pushes this on Eli when Ben finally snaps from the bullying. There is body horror, both with seeing this rash as well as something that Ben does. It is close enough for me to consider it adjacent. Let's then look over what carries this would be the actor performances. The three leads here of Bluick, Martin, and Edgerton are all great. I love seeing Ben navigate the social dynamics at this camp. Rasmussen is great as this weird kid. He isn't overly worried about the bully, and outside of the time when he's mocked in front of everybody, Eli just wants to do his own thing, and it's when Ben is hard on him that he cracks. The rest of the teens fit for what was needed, mostly following their leader. That fits from what I remember of this era of life. all it's going to be from filmmaking aspects. The cinematography and framing are excellent. It is interesting that this is set in a city. The camp uses a swimming pool that can be how they shot stuff there. But I mean, also for the fact that, like, you have this middle of nowhere feel in the middle of a city. When you're this age and cannot drive, that does capture the isolation. Capturing the despair of bullying was a good element. We were limited on the effects, but everything I saw looked to be practically done. I love the underwater shots that look great, and the sound design and music fit the era as well as set in the atmosphere. In conclusion, this is a compelling and unsettling character-driven drama that effectively uses the isolated setting of a water polo camp to explore serious themes. While not a traditional horror film, its unflinching look at bullying, social hierarchies, and the profound psychological damage of ostracism pushes it into the realm of psychological and body horror adjacency. Anchored by outstanding performances, particularly from Bluck as Ben and Martin as Jake, and supported by strong filmmaking choices, this succeeds as a thoughtful Lord of the Flies style examination of a fragile moral compass under pressure. It's a difficult watch, but a highly recommended one for how powerfully this reminds the audience that the choices we make, even seemingly insignificant moments of youth, can have irreparable, life-altering consequences. So my rating here, then, for The Plague, I give this one a 9 out of 10. Not going to do a spoiler section. I don't necessarily think there's anything deeper I need to go there, so let me go ahead then and get you over to the trailer of my second featured review. And for my second featured review is going to be Midnight Faces from 1926. So this is directed and written by Bennett Cohen, and then Forrest Sheldon also looks like they did a little bit of the writing there with it as well. But this stars Francis X. Bushman Jr., Jake Perrin, and Catherine McGuire, while also featuring here Edward Pale Sr., Charles Belcher, Nora Cecil, Martin Turner, Eddie Dennis, Al Hallett, Andrew Waldron, and Larry Fisher. This is a horror thriller film from the United States, currently sitting on a 5.1 on IMDb, and not enough ratings on Letterboxd, but I would say about a 2-star movie over there, with our synopsis being: a young man inherits a swamp mansion from a previously unknown uncle. Upon arrival with his assistant and the executor, a shadowy figure has seen crawling through a window despite the house supposedly being empty. As staff arrive, they feel a strange presence. When a strange woman flees a knife-wielding assailant into the house, the occupants realize the danger is both external and internal. So this is a film that I learned about due to compiling my list of horror films from 1926 for my Centennial Club concept on Journey with a Cinephile. Other than matching up the title, this is a podcast here, but I was making sure that I had the correct film. I did come into this as blind as possible. The only additional information that I knew is that this was going to be an old dark house film. So let's look at our key players here, and I'll start with our director of Cohen. He has directed 7 features and 1 short. First of his works that I've seen, only one he's done in genre. Then as a writer, he's done a little bit more work, mostly in westerns. He wrote 75 movies and 9 shorts. I've seen 2 for 2%, both in genre. The only other one that I've ever seen from him is actually going to be Wolf's Blood, which was from 1925, so that was covered here on the podcast. And then moving to, actually, I was pulling up here the other writer here, and it looks like they also did a lot of stuff in the Western genre, and looks like they've done 35 different things as a writer. I don't think I've seen any of their works here. I'm just kind of scrolling through real quick. Nope, that looks like about the extent of it. So, first time seeing anything. Not necessarily sure if they did anything in horror, but I'm just going to leave it there. So then, moving to our cast, I'm going to start with Bushman. He's been in 41 films and 7 shorts. First of his works that I've seen, only one in genre. Now, Perrin worked quite a bit more. He was in 185 motion pictures and 15 shorts. I've seen him in 8 things. This ranges from The Great Dictator, The Grapes of Wrath, and the original Ocean's 11. Has 8 horror films that I've seen, or has 8 horror films. I've seen 5. He was in 1939's The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man, The Mummy's Ghost, The Black Castle, and now this. I'm only missing Strange Confession, White Pongo, and The Phantom Speaks. Then last time I look at McGuire, she's in 30 films, 13 shorts. First of her works that I've seen, only one she ever did in genre. Alright, for this movie here though. So the version I watched started with a letter written by Peter Marlin. I couldn't make it out due to the quality, but my guess is that this is setting the stage from the synopsis. He has a manor in the bayou of Florida. It was left to the nephew here of Lynn Claymore, portrayed by Bushman, even though these two have never met. He is coming to take possession with his lawyer of Richard Mason, portrayed by Perrin, and he actually drew up the will for Peter right before he passed. And there's also Trophilius Snap, portrayed by Turner, who is his valet, I would say. He's a former janitor who rose to this position. Now, there's something strange that when they arrive here. There is smoke coming out of a chimney when the place is supposed to be empty. They come in, they do not find anybody, and it's soon from there that they get help. The help starts to arrive, that is. Samuel Lund, who is portrayed by Belcher, is wheelchair bound. Joining him is the housekeeper, Mrs. Hart, portrayed by Cecil, and then Otis by Hallett, who is the butler. The evening then takes a turn when Mary Bronson, portrayed by McGuire, arrives. She is fleeing from somebody who is hiding outside in the bushes. She claims that they look like they're Asian. This would also make sense that Peter spent most of his life in China. Richard fears that whoever is hiding outside is trying to scam the house away from Lynn. He is suspicious of Mary as well. This then becomes a mystery of trying to figure out who everybody is. Lynn and Richard keep seeing this masked person in the house, but every time they think that they are cornered with them, they disappear. There are tunnels and passageways that are hidden in the walls. There's a much bigger plot here, especially with this person lingering outside comes in with 2 detectives. He turns out to be Shui Chang, portrayed by Peel, and he makes a declaration that Peter never drew up any will. Everything will need to be sorted out before this leads to murder. So I'll tell you my recap and action of the character. I want to start is that this is an interesting little film, as I'm a fan of these old dark house narratives. Seeing that this runs for 55 minutes, I was concerned with how well they were going to develop the story. What is interesting is that the reveal pulled me back in, actually. Aside from that, this is quite slow with the development of the story. I do think that the lack of action and things truly happening, though, is kind of a little bit of an issue. What I'll say here is we have a small cast. We're mostly following Lynn, and he's mostly with Richard. Now, Mary joins them occasionally. What is interesting is that since she shows up in the middle of the night, Richard distrusts her, and I like how that factors in. And then when she starts to become in peril here, Lynn does want to help her. There's another issue here of Mrs. Hart, Otis, and Samuel arrive, and they disappear for long stretches after they do. We're mostly seeing this masked figure and Sui, and it just kind of gets a little bit repetitive here. Something I'll also include is that part of the major reveal I guessed early on, I'm going to go ahead and chalk this up to having seen a good number of these films that fall into this subgenre. I predicted somebody was going to be involved, and I also had an inkling that there's going to be somebody else working with them. It doesn't ruin it for me, even though I guessed it, it does kind of lessen the impact though. I am curious if I would have seen this one before others, if it would have worked better. I also want to include some core elements and themes here, which will include Lynn's burden of inherited legacy and the need to prove the bravery, the dread of the isolated old dark house setting, hidden motives suggesting not everybody is as they seem, hinting at a haunting while seeking a rational explanation. There's also xenophobia evident in Trophilius' dialogue, Sui's casting, he's supposed to be Asian, but he's played by Peel, and then Peter's life in China. Not everything is developed as I've seen it done better elsewhere, especially in this era, but it is still at least present. Let's then shift over to the story and go over to like the acting performances. What's interesting is that the performances aren't over the top as you'd expect for a silent era film. Bushman is fine as our lead. I did like that along with Perrin, he's trying to figure out who this masked person is. McGuire shows good fear. Peel is problematic along with Turner. The former because he's played by an Asian character. My issue with Turner is that he has some racist intertitles with how he talks. Belcher, Cecil, Hallett, Waldron, Fisher, and Turner's performances round this out for what was needed. All that's left then to be the filmmaking elements. Despite the era's technological limitations, the cinematography and framing effectively capture the old dark house setting. The copy's poor condition made it difficult to see things, so a cleaned up version would be welcome. The effects are minimal but adequate. The authenticity of the synchronized music is uncertain. A common issue that I have with films, from this era, being a century old. The main drawback is the narrative is repetitive in nature just because of that 55-minute runtime. There's not enough real ability to kind of flesh other things out. So the only trivia here is that the earliest documented telecast took place on February 7th, 1950, and it looks like it was Channel 11 in Los Angeles, is the 7th presentation in their Nickelodeon Flicker series, so it must have been they're going back and just showing old stuff, so only trivia I could find. In conclusion, this is noteworthy, if somewhat flawed, example of the old dark house subgenre from the silent era. Its brevity at 55 minutes attempts to deliver a tightly packed mystery, yet the narrative repetition and the slow pacing occasionally undermine the suspense. While the film successfully establishes an atmosphere of dread and features a compelling reveal, the dated racial elements are unavoidable and distracting. Ultimately, it serves as an interesting artifact for fans of early horror and mystery, showcasing the foundational elements of a genre trope, even if its full potential is hampered by its runtime structure and a quality of exant Prince. I think that might be how you say that word. I don't even know why I wrote it. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, though, is give this one a 5.5 out of 10. Not going to do a spoiler section. There's not anything I need to do there outside of just giving away the reveal, and I don't want to do that. So let me go ahead and get you over to one last break before I close out the show.
Pod Nation TV has you beamed up with out-of-this-world award-winning podcasts found exclusively on Pod Nation TV. Download Pod Nation TV for Roku and Fire TV. Pod Nation TV, out of this world.
Listen, here's the truth. If it's not something you love to do, automation is mandatory. You didn't start your podcast to spend hours editing clips. You started it to create, connect, and grow your audience. But here's the problem. Every other platform works with video podcasts, and manual editing eats up your most valuable asset, your time. That's where Opus Clip changes everything. Upload your video, and Opus Clip will automatically find the gold nugget moments, auto-clip the captions for the best parts, perfect for TikTok, Reels, and Shorts. 1 hour-long episode becomes 10, 20, even 30 viral-ready clips in minutes. The tool even predicts each clip's viral potential, so you know exactly what to post. No more tenuous editing, no more wasted hours, just you staying in the place that you love to be, creating content that matters. Head to podnationopus.com for your free trial and get back to doing what you do best. Stop editing and start creating now.
And welcome back. So if you'd like to send me any sort of feedback, anything you want read on the show, or any screener requests, anything like that, you can send those to journeywithacinephile@gmail.com. If you'd like to read any of my written reviews or see any of the old past podcast episodes, all of that is being stored over at Journey with a Cinephile. That is my blog, and that's going to be horrorreview.webnode.com. If you'd like to follow me and become friends on Facebook, it's going to be David Garrett Jr. is my name over on there. There's going to be a link in the show notes. And then if you'd like to follow me on Twitter, it's going to be Buckeye from Mish. And then if you'd like to follow my Letterboxd page where I have all of my reviews, whether that is going to be horror or non-horror, that's going to be David OSU is my name on that. Instagram and Threads, I'm David OSU87. Over on my personal Instagram page, you might see some of my family stuff every now and then whenever I remember to post something. My wife is much better at it than I am. But then if you'd like to follow the Journey with a Cinephile Instagram, that's going to be Journey with a Cinephile, all one word. And then I'll also direct you, if you'd like, to the Discord channel. That's going to be the Nightclub Discord, but I have a page over there. And there's also some other great pages of other shows and them kind of messing around and everything like that. Do highly recommend if you want to go ahead and check that out. And then the last thing I'll actually say here, if you would like to listen to the show a day early, this is always going to be streaming over there on the Pod Nation TV app. So I will have, once again, a link in the show notes for that if that is something that you're interested in. So, yeah, there's some great stuff here. There's some great shows on some of these other networks and stuff. I highly recommend checking them out. And for my next episode is going to be my first of the scouring through the 6 episodes, as I've already watched the first one here. It's going to be The Devil Doll from 1936. And then my goal is actually going to go to the Gateway Film Center to check out Exit 8. The problem there has been just I haven't been able to go there to check that one out. If not, I will pivot to a movie that I have, kind of lined up as a backup plan. And then Chopping Mall is going to be my scouring through the 6's rewatch from 1986. And then Primate, as of right now, is going to be my 2026 rewatch. Other than that, I have a screener as well as some other films that I'll kind of just watch here to fill out the episode with what I can. So I don't think there's anything else I need to say here for this outro, except that wraps up this episode of Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of horror cinema. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow along for more deep dives into the macabre. Until next time, keep watching horror, and remember, fear is just a frame away.
It had been a wonderful evening, and what I needed now to give it the perfect ending